Welcome to Seniority Authority, the podcast where I track down experts to answer your questions on aging. I'm your host, Cathleen Toomey. Let's get smarter about growing older. Welcome to Seniority Authority. I'm your host, Cathleen Toomey. On this podcast, we talk a lot about aging, about finance, insurance, fitness, downsizing. But today, we're going to tackle purpose. So many people I know feel as though they've done what they anticipated that they wanted to do, yet they'll be living longer than expected. How do we seek our next purpose that gives meaning to our lives? Today's guest is a friend, a speaker, an entrepreneur, and a family man who lives what he preaches. Author of the book Soul Intention, an executive's guide to living life by choice, not chance. Chris Yonker left a successful sales leadership role at 3M to coach hundreds of high-performing professionals to take a look at how they find meaning and purpose in life. Chris now runs the Center for Conscious Living and Fulfillment. Thanks to our show sponsor, the Riverwoods Group, Northern New England's largest family of nonprofit retirement communities, where active adults find community, purpose, and peace of mind. Visit riverwoodsgroup.org. Now let's hear from today's guest. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, Chris.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. This is wonderful to have a friend and a podcaster and a super smart guy to share some wisdom with our listeners.
I'm glad to be here.
Many people probably don't know that you left a very successful 20-plus year gig at 3M, leading a sales team and breaking quotas. Most people in that role just stay and keep knocking it out of the park. What made you step away from that whole lifestyle? Yeah,
one of those things where it was like the easiest decision and the hardest decision all at one time. In essence, I had clarity in how I wanted to live my life. And we'll talk about that, this model of what the life vision looked like. And quite frankly, I probably wouldn't have left when I did if they hadn't done a reorganization. And at that time, my role has shifted. And I was in a place where my strengths were being deployed, being utilized at a very high level. And I had a lot of autonomy. And I dug up 80% plus of what I was doing. And when everything shifted around, it was like, what just happened? And I realized that if I stayed, then I was staying for a paycheck. And my purpose wasn't, I asked the manager and I said, so the reason that they changed my position is because of the reorganization. I understand that. But the reason I'm in the role that you put me in is because you had someone that was in this role last year and they retired and the position was open and I happened to live in the geography of that position.
Oh.
And I said, so it has nothing to do with my strengths, has nothing to do with my gifts, has nothing to do with what I've been doing. If that's irrelevant, it was like there's a seat open and you happen to live in the place where that to sit in that seat.
You have the right address.
I had the right address. And he said, yes. And I said, well, I'm not interested in that job.
That must have been a shocker for him.
I wouldn't interview. I said, I wouldn't interview it for if it was available. And he said, I understand, but at least you have a seat at the table. You still have a seat at the table. Some people get laid off. And I said, what's the table of what? I'm like, I'm a little lost. So that was pretty much it. There was one other position that had opened that I interviewed for because I felt it was really aligned with after that long of a career. And I'm like, well, I'm building a pension and there's a lot of upside. I'm like, as long as I can be on purpose and I'm good. And that didn't work out. So then I had to go. I had to. It didn't matter what happened. It just wasn't going to work.
Wow. And you say that you had clarity in terms of what was next. How did you come about with that clarity?
Well, it really started with clarity, a vision of what we wanted our life to look like, 360. And so that it was like, okay, this is how I want my life to look. And to talk about that, I basically created a process that I've been using with my clients that I followed for myself. In essence, that process allows you to build a compass. So you have a compass. And so like, okay, well, I'm following where I feel pulled to go based upon, my life purpose. And then there's a bit of faith that's involved with that too, because you don't really know exactly what's going to happen. Like
Sure.
when doors are going to open or not open up, or it's easier just to show up and do a job and deal with what you're told and having a level of predictability.
And you left a very predictable job for something that was unknown.
Exactly. Yeah. And in some cases, it's still unknown. I mean, I have great clients. We've got a great business, but there's still who the next ones are going to be. I don't know. I don't know who will show up. And it doesn't mean I sit and wait for them to knock on my door. That's not how it works. But there's a bit of and life's that way too, though. I believe there's a bit of a dance that we get to do.
Yeah. Yeah. How much of this process, this compass, had you been working on while you were at 3M? And how much of it did this change inspire you to craft something?
Yeah, good question. So I would say the answer to that was probably periods of time we got to pay attention to what occurs. Well, we don't have to, but I suggest we pay attention to what happens in our lives as we're participating in it. And when things show up, and so someone would reach out and ask me for some, it was constantly someone, if I look back now, you connect the dots, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes we can't see where the dots connect until later down. And then we're looking back on time, right?
Oh, sure.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And one of the things that I'd realized was that, well, this is about, about 10 years ago, at least, it was that I was the person that seemed to be the one that friends, family, and colleagues would go to when they're coming to or in a crossroads. And it was like, that's interesting. I didn't sign up for that.
But you became a sounding board for a lot of disparate people.
Yeah. It's like I have a flashlight. I'm able to find the blind spots in the shadows. Mm-hmm. And as I am a personal development nut and self-development nut, and so I've done all sorts of different strengths profiles, personality assessments.
Oh, yeah. All the tools.
Yeah.
The DISC, Myers-Briggs.
And I've done some that are outliers, like using numerology or astrology, or just the interesting thing, Kathleen, is the more I did, the more I realized how they're in the same universe. Like the information that came back was like, whoa, I can't ignore this. Like the common message is I was a guide. Period. I'm like, okay. So like, all right, now I know my purpose is to be a guide for people who are navigating, and that I'm able to see things they can't see. I can hear things people can't at a much deeper level. And I have a high capacity for building trust very quickly with people. And so and it is what it is. And I'm like, well, I can either own that or not own it. It's my choice. And as folks started coming to me, and I'm like, well, 12 years ago, we'll talk once a month, twice a month, whatever, pay me $100. And then it turned into some consulting work. And then it turned into executive coaching work. And it turned into, then I was starting to get pulled into family succession scenarios. And just from like people that knew me were pulling me in to like, I was activating the vision that I wanted. I had clarity in what that was. I had resolution in how I wanted to live. And then I just was in a place where I just created the space to pay attention to what showed up. And some people were like, well, how'd you find family business? I'm like, I didn't go looking for it. Someone said, hey, I got a challenge. I want to bring you into it. And I literally was in this meeting with this family, and I could see all the dynamics and all the challenges and each person's own dysfunction and the family dysfunction and the scenarios and where people wanted to go and how their egos were involved. And they said, can you help us? And I go into the whiteboard, I started drafting out, like it just started coming to me. And I'm like, all right, okay, how will this work? I said, we'll work together over the next 3 months. We're going to do A, B, and C. And they said, what's it going to cost? And Kathleen, I didn't know. I'm like, well, I'm like $30,000. And they're like, okay. I'm like, all right. And then I was like, then I got a hold of someone. Can I help me with a contract? I mean, I knew the value to them much more than that. So
you were listening to what you were paying attention to, what you knew about yourself. You took the opportunity that was presented to you when you were offered an easy path that you knew wasn't in alignment. And you kind of opened yourself to the universe and said, this is what I want to manifest.
Yeah. I believe there's a spirituality component to it. And as a faith-based person, I just believe that our desires, not egomaniacal things that we want to get to like prove ourselves, but our true desire, heart desires come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so do our gifts. So then how do we leverage those gifts to help other people and at the same time pursue our desires, right? And then have faith in that there's a way to co-create that. That's why actually in our compass process, there is a base level in the hierarchy. Fulfillment is spirituality. And that's really just the definition of who do you believe you are and what do you believe about life? And no one ever denies that we're mortal. Nobody. No one can argue that point.
They may live like that, right? But they don't deny it.
No one will deny it. So then it's just like, well, what do you believe about that situation and why you're here and what this is about? Those constructs, well, they're all constructs. They're all illusions, they're all paradigms. So if you really step out of it, all the things that we think and believe are, in essence, either programmed into us or we program into ourselves. But those, how we look at that frame, it's the foundation for everything else, really, quite frankly. Everything else is built on top of that.
Now, your focus is to help more people live in alignment with their core values.
Yeah.
How do you start that conversation or process? And especially how do you encourage people to think about that? People who are not 20 years old, maybe they're 70, maybe they're 65, maybe they're 75. How do you encourage them to think about this new way of looking?
Yeah. And core values are always there. So I'm doing a workshop tomorrow with a founder of a business, and he go, what are the core values of business? We did some discovery. They're doing a succession and people didn't know. And I'm like, well, they're here. They're here. We don't have to make them. We just got to find them. So we're unconscious to what they are. And we all have them. We may not live in integrity to them, but we all have core values. And so the work really is getting clarity on what is it specifically. And we have exercises that we use. Exercises with cards or just a list or whatever it is to help narrow down the ideas and the premise behind that. But for example, if we say this word, one of my wife's core values, we did this exercise where we narrowed them down to 3 each. And then
That's hard.
It was really hard. But Kathleen, what made it easy is that you start creating subcategories of the core values. And then it makes it a little bit easier because you don't have to like buy into a word. You can buy into a concept that encapsulates potentially multiple words, but it's not like you're kidding yourself, but you really have a semblance of clarity what it's about. So for health and wellness is one of ours. That's an easy one. We live, I would say, pretty strongly to that. But like something like, okay, well, one of the ones that Jolie picked, what I thought was interesting, was balance. But what that meant to her is that everything has to work together. And if it's not working together, it doesn't fit. And so when you say, okay, well, how do you do that? Well, when she said, I think it was a pretty smart way to put it was, I use this as a screen. So it has to pass through the screen in order to get in the calendar or to check in and say, well, okay, for example, for us, like if we say, okay, we're going to go on a trip. All right, we're going on a trip. And then we're going to come back for a week, 2 weeks, and then go back on another trip. That doesn't feel very balanced. Why? Because there's a lot of going into getting ready for a trip, right? And then you got to organize all that stuff and pack and then unpack. Like so there's an on-ramp and off-ramp to a trip, depending on the type of trip you're going on. And so you got this on-ramp and off-ramp, and then you put the off-ramp close to another on-ramp. It's not going to go so good, right? And so that would be a check-in. And also I can check in with my gut and say, I could talk about that if we have time, but I'll do it now. So sometimes we make decisions and we make decisions out of our head. And that's nice, but that's where logic is. And that's also where our fear is as well. But when we're making decisions from our gut, like our sacral feeling, that's not in our head. So if we want to get out of our head, get into our body, and really check in and say, how do I feel about it? And sometimes it's like, I don't know how I feel about right now. I'm going to wait on this. But no one ever says, oh, gee, I listened to my gut and it was wrong. I mean, it doesn't happen. And it's usually, I didn't listen and I knew I should have, is usually what it is for most people. But in essence, so that's the litmus test on values. And one thing that I learned when I studied neuro-linguistic programming, which is NLP, or the science of behavior change, it's basically the science that Anthony Robbins uses. In fact, the guy who originally mentored Tony has worked with me.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, which was kind of pretty cool. I worked with Wyatt for about 2 years. And anyway, one thing he taught me is that when someone defines core values, what you can do is you do an audit. And he said the way you audit core values is you look at their calendar and you look at their finances.
Oh, boy.
Then you see, are they investing the resources of time and money, things they might have within limitation, into the things they say they value? And that's a pretty good way to audit someone. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is very cool.
I value my family. My family's number one. Awesome. Great. Let's look at the calendar. Let's look at the finances. I've had executives that are like, I've had people that were not spending hardly any vacation time. And so, there was no boundaries on their schedule. And then they wonder why they're having challenges at home.
That is really, really a good suggestion, is to take a look at how you invest your time and money. That's all we have.
Yeah.
Is time and money.
Yeah.
I bet that brings a lot of people up short when they do.
It can. What's really driving us, what in essence is pulling us along. And I think that's the challenge when people, I think of my grandfather. So he's someone I emulate. And so he retired and then he started another business. And that business was just basically buying and selling real estate and just property in the woods. And him and his buddy would tool around and they just had a great time doing it. And anyway, my grandmother got Alzheimer's and then she ended up having to go to assisted living. That was a tough scenario. And then my grandfather lived independently until he was 98.
Wow.
Yeah, he was driving well into his mid-90s. Arguably, maybe shouldn't have been, but he was. And in fact, he came out here to New Hampshire for I have pictures of it was 95th or 96th birthday. I mean, crazy.
He drove out here?
He flew out here.
Okay. All right. Good.
Yeah, he didn't drive out here. God forbid he didn't drive.
Oh, no.
But he flew out here and we celebrated birthday when he was here. It was a lot of fun.
Fantastic.
It was really cool. Yeah, it was really cool. And so he had a great social circle. He played tennis, at least till 90. He played golf close to then and things that he would do. And the challenge that he ran into, his friends were all starting to pass away.
Yeah.
And then a lot of his, family was passing away and people his age. And it started weighing on him. And he was just like, whew. He didn't have any health issues, but he's like, why am I even around here? And I remember, and then he decided, at the time, he's like, okay, it's best I move into assisted living and kind of independent, but still. And I remember sitting with him and we were talking about some of this and he was reflecting and then talking about, well, what am I going to do from here? And it was really interesting. But the thing I got to is the core values didn't change. Mm-hmm. His gifts and talents didn't change. The only piece that might have changed is that his vision for what he wanted to do with his life, a lot of that had been accomplished.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the only thing really left in that regard was what other additional memories could he create and where else could he serve and contribute beyond? And I think those are the two key elements that we kind of landed on.
Really, really cool. What a remarkable guy and an inspiration. If you're getting smarter, help us reach more minds. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts so others know we're legit. Tell your friends to follow us on social or subscribe to our newsletter at seniorityauthority.org.
Yeah. And the compass, those are the three elements. It's what are my core values? Mm-hmm. What's my 360 vision of my life, which is everything from health and well-being to love and relationships to the family, social experiences we want to create, environments we want to be in, and then business, financial, and all these elements kind of build on top of one another. But what does that look like? What are the elements to that? Why do you have those elements? Why is it important to you? And then what are your strengths? What are your gifts? What are your talents? Where are you contributing? And how are you developing, deploying those on a regular basis? So that, in essence, we're making the world a better place somehow.
When people come to you, when your clients seek you out, typically, what are they trying to resolve? What is other than the family businesses and the succession planning, because that's understandable. Why do people come to you? What do they feel they're out of alignment with?
Yeah. Well, there's something typically they're looking for peace. They're not saying that, but they want more peace and in their life, and they're not sure why they can't have it. In fact, what's happened, most people I've worked with are high achievers. So they're people that have created success, how you define success. Actually, one of the exercises I give folks is to define quality of life. What's that mean? What are the elements of a quality life? What are the attributes to that? But in essence, I'm thinking of some best-selling authors I've worked with that are younger than myself. Some of them were, but they're not happy. But they're well, they're making seven figures, have the things that most people would want to have, and just not happy, just can't find peace, can't find inspiration, can't find joy. It's what happens is a lot of folks, they pursue something that they say, okay, this is what's going to make me happy. I'm going to win at this. I'm going to be number one. I'm going to give you a bestseller, or I'm going to be a recording artist or whatever. I'm going to make this list, or I'm going to build something and I'm going to run it. And I'm going to be the person with authority and power. Or I'm going to get into the social circle and I'm going to be known, and then people are going to know me here. And then all of these attributes, are these drivers, I should call them. All these drivers, they're extrinsically built and they're all ego-centered, all of them.
That's exactly right.
And for the folks, a lot of times folks don't realize that they could create conditions in their life, that those conditions that drive happiness, joy, peace, fulfillment, these conditions that they've built, and they're all based upon rules that are driven by them having to obtain something against something else. And it's okay, I've got a bucket and I've got holes in the bottom of the bucket and I'm trying to fill the water and I'm kind of bring it over here and I can't keep it full. I don't understand what's going on. So then the answer is, well, I've just got to do more and I've got to work harder.
Get more money.
And I've got to grind it out more. And that's a big part of, I think, a lot of our society when it comes to hey, if you're not grinding it out, you're not doing it. You're not on point.
I completely agree with you. We worship work. We worship external achievement and titles and money and cars and all of these things that are created by society, not by our internal desires of what is fulfilling us. And we think that acquiring these things will lead to fulfillment.
Right.
And that doesn't happen. But you don't realize that many times until you spent a long time pursuing these things that are supposed to make you happy.
Yeah. And you get them and then you get them and then you're still like, what's going on? And so that's for a lot of folks, it's like, well, they can't figure that out. So it's like, how do you get someone there? And it's like, well, you got to redirect. Well, I look as, like I said, tell people, I'm not going to take away your drive because it's what got you to where you are, but we want to redirect it and in a different way. To give you another example, I was working with someone who, let's say mid-age, and we're working through some transition so that they basically wanted more autonomy in their life. So we kind of worked through what they needed to do that with their business, built a vision out, got clarity, started mapping out. The strategy is not usually the issue, as you'll see in a second here. So everything started moving forward, less involved with the business, at certain capacities, more freedom, more autonomy. And then I heard back from some folks on the leadership team that this person kept going back in to these meetings. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. We changed everything around. Why are they doing this? And not only are they getting involved, they're getting involved in making things complicated and messy. And so I got into conversation with a business owner and I said, what was happening? And they told me, and I think this is important for people to understand, is oftentimes when we answer the question why we're doing something, we typically have to, or why we can't do something, we typically construct a story. Mm-hmm. Now, the story is our illusion that we have to present to ourselves, that we have to buy first. And then secondly, we get to sell the story to other people. So it's got to be pretty good. It's got to be a good story.
Yeah.
And so we got to believe it and we got to sell. And so anyways, I know from my training that I don't want to spend a whole lot of time at the level of the story because the story is just a bunch of BS. It's not real.
It's well constructed, but it's BS.
It's not the real reason.
Right.
Yeah, it's not the real reason. In the conversation at some point, I said, something's off. And I said, let me ask you a different question. I'm going to hire you to come in and do a talk to a high school group that's graduating. And I'd love to have you give a commemorative speech on how to build 7-figure income and a business and all these other things that you've done. And I'd love to have you tell them what to do and how to do it. And so what we said, what are the core elements? Give me some real high level, what are the top big bullet points you'd have to share? And he said, well, basically, it's you have to work hard. I said, okay. And you have to pay the price. I said, okay. And he said, I have to struggle. Oh, I said, okay. You have to struggle. He said, yeah. And then you get the reward. I said, okay. I said, what if you didn't have to struggle? And he said, I wouldn't even know. That's not even possible. I said, no. I said, but what if it were? Like, what if you could have the success and not have to struggle? I'm not saying you don't work. I'm not saying you don't have to struggle. He said, then I wouldn't deserve it. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. So now we're getting to the heart of the matter. We've created more ease in your life, but you have a paradigm that says if you don't struggle, you don't deserve the success. And so now you have to go in and create more problems so you can solve them, so you can feel like you deserve it.
Wow.
Yeah. And this
That's
person
revealing.
Several coaches, several consultants. Like, this was not their first time to try to get to where they wanted to go. And the emergency brakes on. It's happened one time. My grandmother and I were driving around. She used to talk. We'd shop and talk. And we got back to the garage and pulled in their house in Muskegon, Michigan. And I'm like, something stinks. And then we looked down and the emergency brake was just clicked a couple times, you know? She's like, oh, whew. So she clicks it, pushes it down so that it disengages. She's like, don't tell your grandfather. So I won't tell him. I never did tell him. And needless to say, that's what happens. The emergency brake's on. They don't even realize it. And then the answer, though, is work harder, work strong, faster, more. And it's trying to override what's really happening underneath the surface.
That makes so much sense. That it's part of our kind of Calvinistic culture that you have to work hard, and you can't stop. And oftentimes you don't get more unless you let go of what you have. And then you're open to what the universe is ready to give you. But it's also because it's familiar, right? Your client did this for years and years, and it helped him get to where he is. So he needs to learn a whole new way of thinking now that he has earned success. It's a different way. So your strengths in your early part of your career, when you've gotten that pinnacle, you have to learn different ways to reap the rewards, perhaps.
Right. Yeah. It's a matter of like, what outcomes are you really after? And what do you believe about having to obtain those outcomes? And I'm really ideally looking to do is just help people create a higher sense of peace and ease. Like that's what I said earlier. That's what they want. They're looking for it initially. The path is about transformation and personal discovery. It's not, I want to figure out if I need to sell my company. I need to figure out, I remember a gentleman who was well in the 70s and that he didn't want to let the business go because the business defined who he was and didn't know what to do next.
Sure.
And that was a tough one. And he's like, well, I'm not just going to go down to Florida and just get an RV and just sit there and do nothing. And I'm like, okay, like that's one of 1,000 options. So what? I mean, I've had some folks also say like, I don't want to spend that much time with my spouse. It's okay. That's fine too. I'm here to judge anyone on anything. It's a matter of how do you want this to look? It's interesting with the work that you're doing, Kathleen, if you looked at like other cultures and other parts of the world in relationship to how they define later in life, or because there's a lot of differences in the Western society and different versus others.
There is. And one of my favorite writers on this topic is Arthur Brooks, who's coming out with a new book this week called From Strength to Strength. He spent 5 to 7 years going through different cultures, Eastern, Western, and talking about how people find purpose and deep purpose and meaning in the second half of life. And I think for so many people in the U.S. today, they are living longer than ever before. So it's almost this, Social Security started in 1933. The life expectancy was 65. That's why I started at 65. Now, life expectancy is mid-80s on average. So what do we do with that 20 additional years? I think that's what people are struggling with now, that we've got much healthier 65-year-olds and 70-year-olds and people running marathons and doing yoga and all kinds of things. They have new knees, new hips. They're physically better than prior generations, with the exception of your grandfather. And what do they do now? And I think part of what I'm thinking for our listeners is if our listeners are at this point where they are approaching retirement or in retirement and they want deeper meaning and purpose in their life, what advice would you give them in terms of how do they think differently about their life? And you talk about living consciously.
Yeah.
Can you give our listeners some ideas as to how they could think about this exploration and how they would dare do something different? I love the idea of renewing ourselves at different points in time. How would they start that process?
I think the first piece is to realize that you can. And to bring up the idea of different societies, if you studied other parts of the world and how people look at aging, in our world here, it's like it's something you don't want to do. It's awful. Like, don't do that. You got to recreate yourself. Like, I'm not here to judge Madonna, but she looks definitely different than she did before, right? Like, so in some people's mind, that's how we recreate ourselves, right? And that's not what we're talking about here necessarily. What do you believe about doing something new? And I think that oftentimes it can be hard to change our thinking the longer we hold the same frame, the longer we hold the same beliefs. It can be difficult to change beliefs that we've held on to for so long, but no one said you couldn't. And just because you're determined to think differently doesn't mean you're wrong before when you held that belief. And I think sometimes our ego doesn't allow us to make that shift. Orders of business is being okay with making some level of change, knowing that you don't have to make yourself wrong up to that moment for any particular reason, point, or time. That we can, the idea of consciousness, if anyone studied David Hawkins, he wrote that book called Power versus Force, and he talks about these different layers of consciousness. And the idea is that you want to operate at a higher level. Things like guilt, shame, anger, they're at the bottom of the continuum. Things like peace, love, enlightenment are at the top of the continuum. And so the idea is that I want to operate at a place of not having this negativity, if you will. And that's one piece, right? So that's an attitude. But more than an attitude, it's a state of being. It's just how we're showing up. And so that's one order of business. The other thing is to look at, I like to get people to think about some practice in mindfulness. Now, mindfulness really is just a practice of like paying attention to where you are in the context of now, right? In the moment. And we use time, the continuum of of time in our mind often. And in fact, emotions are time contextualized. If I want to feel guilt, I got to go back to the past and think about something I did I shouldn't have done and why it was wrong. If I want to feel loss or sorrow or for someone pass, I think about them in the past and then I go to the future and think about how they're not going to be here. So these are all things that if I want to feel worry or anxiety, then I go to the future and I think about what can go wrong and I live there.
I've never thought of this.
Yeah.
I never thought of emotions being time contextualized.
They are.
That's fascinating.
It is. It is pretty interesting. So here we're going to get somewhere good now.
Okay, good.
Not that we haven't been. But think about this. So I go to the past and I feel guilt or shame. Past doesn't exist. I go to the future. I grew up in an environment that had a lot of volatility to it. So I can be a warrior, bottom line. I'm a recovering warrior. Okay. And worry lives in the future. Go to the future. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Oh my, that's it. Right. If I don't go to the future, I can't worry. Interesting. So happiness and peace are in the now. You want to experience happiness? You've got to be in the present moment.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is fascinating. Well, when you were talking about the past, I was immediately going to, well, I am a worrier and I always think about the future and what could go wrong.
Yeah.
So you are right. Oh my God. I've never heard it explained that way. That is really...
So then you say, well, what's the answer? Well, you spend more time in the now is the answer. And you say, well, how the hell do I do that? Well, we have to train ourselves to do that because we haven't been taught to do it.
Absolutely.
There's some great books on emotional intelligence, but they don't even talk about how to construct emotions like I'm going into right now. And states, how to create state in the body, and also how to use visualization, auditory cues, like how we see things in our mind, like all of this, unpack it and to create it. We do it unconsciously. So that's part of the process of raising level of consciousness. When I'm working with people and coaching them, I'm raising their level of consciousness and creating more ability to own these things because I'm helping them unpack what they don't know how to unpack. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Because this is all baked into us at a very early age. So it's not easy.
Teaches us. Why would they teach us at school?
Yeah.
It doesn't even make sense. Seriously.
Oh, I have Wilhelmina, a second grade teacher. Who teaches yoga in class. Yeah. If only I had a yoga teacher in my second grade, I would be a totally different person now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. She teaches locally here in Brentwood. So exactly. So these are part of the challenges. I ask my kids in my karate class, can someone make you mad? And they're like, oh yeah, that societally, that's sure. Someone makes you mad. Like that's not even possible. But well, I guess they do because we're unconsciously navigating that way. So we want to recreate ourselves, let's just say later in life. I just don't see a good way to do it without creating a higher level of consciousness first. And so I would suggest, I haven't found, you already know this, but I haven't found because you and I have talked, a better path than something like meditation. And you say, well, meditation, what's that? Well, you can start with guided meditation. There's Headspace, there's Calm, there's all sorts of Insight Timer is another one. There's places you can go. And there's a lot of resources out there that are available. Transcendental Meditation. Hey, this is no joke. I got my grandfather at 98 to take a meditation class.
Wow, that's impressive.
I did. Swear to God, it's the truth.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I did. And because he was going out in his future a lot and worrying about my parents and all sorts of crazy business. So I couldn't help him beyond that.
It couldn't be easier today for our listeners, and we'll be putting these in the show notes along with Chris's book. Couldn't be easier to download a meditation app. It is just, as you say in yoga, the practice. It is just returning to it.
And quite frankly, if you lived in an Eastern society, we wouldn't even have to talk about this because you probably would potentially, anywhere you lived, you might be even doing it. The foundation of yoga, the idea is to yoke. Right? To yoke the mind. And the idea was to find still the mind, to get to that space in between. It's not just about exercise. I go on a rant when I start talking about the yoga that's built on exercising. That's not why we're here. But regardless, the foundation.
Oh, I could be there with you.
The foundation of it is really, truly for that. It's paramount. It's paramount because no one teaches us how to run this. So once we can find some stillness, I say like, okay, we got a compass and it's built on these three principles. Well, then we want to keep it away from magnets and say, okay, our ego can be a magnet to throw it off.
Ooh,
and also,
good analogy.
Yeah. Lower level consciousness can throw it off. So part of the process I go through is helping people find that stillness and that space, creating that space. I mean, it's funny because like you said earlier about our work culture, one of the things that used to drive me crazy is people that I hadn't seen in a while and say, how are you doing? How are you doing? Busy? I'm like, why? I want to say, why? Why do you lead with busy? Like, what is that? Like, what's that all about?
Busy
Like,
is such a
really,
badge. It is such a badge. Everybody
it's so
walks around with busy,
crazy.
busy, busy.
Yeah. I'm like, it's nutty. It's
Yeah.
nutty. Like, what's that? Why? And, you know, that goes back to that Emerson quote. It's not so much to be busy, so too are the ants. The question is, what are you busy about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this doesn't mean you always have to be doing. I gave one of my clients a homework assignment, and he's a great guy, high level achiever. We've been working together for a couple of years. In that context, he sold his business. He's living a really amazing life, but he's having a hard time still sitting still. So I gave him a homework assignment that I want him to just take 90 minutes and do nothing.
That's hard.
I know.
That's really hard.
Isn't that awful? We've been working together long
90
enough.
minutes.
He's ready for it. Yeah. So anyway, it's interesting, right? It's like, oh, but I'm wasting time. So I'm going to fill it doing like, come on, seriously. It'll be interesting to see what he comes back with when we chat next. I coach people that have some same challenges I've wrestled and or sometimes are still wrestling with. So I'm not saying, hey, look at me. I'm up on the mountain and I'm perfect, because I'm not. I said I'm a recovering worrier. I didn't say I don't worry anymore, but I'm working on it. If I can just do a little less every day, that's a win, right?
Wow.
Over time, it's a win.
Think about that. You just said doing less, not doing more. And you are living a real life. You're a parent to a young daughter. You own your own business.
I do.
You live in the real world.
I have a mom who's in Michigan and I'm in New Hampshire, and she's managing herself, but I'm managing her world. She's living in a retirement community that has assisted living benefit to it, but there's other decisions we'll have to make in the near future. And so I've got that too on my plate, and I'm an only child. So I'm it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of pieces and parts, even deciding like, would she move out here? Or we had to decide that. And why did we decide that she'd stay where all the rest of her family is? And what's that, the fact that we still go back there, and navigating these decisions, which is that goes back to the compass. Like, how do we navigate these decisions? It's not the same for everybody. And people say, well, what's the best way to do this or that? It's like, well, we got to orientate for you. Not for someone else. It's what's best for you.
And if you are married, your compasses would have to align in some way. Otherwise,
so that's exactly it. So when I'm working with the family, it's exactly it. I tell them, I said, if it's a family business, I know a lot of people listening just hear me out. If you had multiple people in your family and they all had a compass, and then you had something called a business, it's got its own compass. And then we're looking at where are we going in parallel and where are we not? And I was like, at couples, it's like, well, what you want to do is create interdependence. So you're both independent. And then, but there's a relationship. And then the goal is that with the other person in your life, you're that much better for your trajectory of your own life purpose. The way I look at it, it's the element, right? Like, how do I make your life purpose stronger and more evident, and you mine? And we work together and without having to take away.
That's a beautiful image for a Valentine's Day. I like that, where you can help each other with your purpose and be more present in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
If you had one suggestion for our listeners as to how they could start this journey of being more conscious and aligned, what would that recommendation be? What specifically would you suggest they do?
That's a really good question. And there's a few places you can start. And typically the place to start is not where you're trying to get away from. And when I say that is because oftentimes our orientation is to move away from something we don't want. But you can't get to where you want to go while trying to avoid being somewhere else. And that's so like, or I want to get away from this. I have a job. I want to go away from my job. I'm going to go jump over here to another job. Whatever it is, or I don't want to do this. I'm going to go do something else I don't want to do. I would really deeply check it. The first step is create space to ask questions and walk with the questions. That's the first step. What do I want more of? What do I want less of? Sometimes it's as easy as doing an energy audit. Energy audit, what I have people do is gives me energy neutral, sucks my energy. And then I basically go through a week of my life and I do an audit.
Oh, I like that. I've used that with people. There are some people that suck energy from you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. The energy vampires.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's right. A sign that you're energy vampires when you make everything about yourself and your drama. That's a sign.
So energy audit.
You're listening. Yeah. An energy audit, one exercise I would give someone. Another exercise is a fun one I start with people is define your ideal day. Not like I won $100 million and I'm going on the National Geographic $100,000 around the world tour. Like, okay, that'd be great. But I like, the ideal everyday day. For me, it's okay. I bring my daughter to school every morning. Like that's part of the picture, right? To like when I go to bed, to what happens during an ideal week, ideal month. So you can just kind of build out like what's the frame of that, right?
Yeah.
What are the components to have that? And then what needs to occur to make that a reality? That's a good exercise, because then at least you're in a place where you're acknowledging and living it. The other thing I ask people to do, to kind of check in on, is these three key areas. One last question I'll share is, if you took love, security, and self-esteem, these three core needs that we have, where are you at on the scale 1 to 10 on each of these? How much do you love yourself on a scale 1 to 10? How much self-esteem do you feel you have in yourself on 1 to 10? And how much sense of security do you have? And if your numbers are lower than 7, which a lot of people, they are a lot that I've come across. And even folks that are really like, people go like, what? A 4? And then find some help to change that number. Because you came in with a level 10 love and a level 10 self-esteem. Now, security, our parents had to fill that void when we're babies. But the other two were full expression of love, full expression of self-esteem. It's our programming and what happened over time that lowered those numbers. And I believe if we're going to self-actualize and live a full life, because otherwise, anyone out there listening, if they don't love herself at a high level, they're automatically not going to believe that they deserve anything we're talking about, Kathleen. So that I had to bring that up because that needs to be addressed.
You're absolutely right. I love those recommendations. I think those exercises and the compass exercise that you mentioned earlier, and starting with creating space for stillness.
Yeah.
That's a very good amount of work for our listeners.
It is. Well, just start with one. Just start with one of those things.
Yeah, but I think you've just outlined a number of things that people can do to see if they are in alignment and to imagine, like their ideal day and their ideal week and their ideal month, what their ideal future could look like if they lived more consciously.
Right.
This has been a fabulous and very illuminating conversation. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing all your wisdom with us, especially that emotion connected to time. I'm going to think a lot about that.
Good. Cool.
So that is Chris Yonker. We are going to have his website, book, and several of his notes in our show notes. If you'd like to reach out to Chris, his website will be available in the show notes. That's our show for today. If you enjoyed it, please tell your friends about us so we can reach more minds. Give us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, and send me your questions on aging. Until then, enjoy the opportunity to get smarter about growing older. Thank you. Thanks to our show sponsor, the Riverwoods Group, Northern New England's largest family of nonprofit retirement communities, where active adults find community, purpose, and peace of mind. Visit riverwoodsgroup.org. That's our show for today. Did it spark a question? If so, send us your questions at seniorityauthority.org and we'll track down the answer. Meanwhile, don't forget to subscribe, like us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, let's get smarter about growing older.